I think the great secret is that the scripts were very good, and they were very good, I think, for two reasons. One is, for a start, that there was an awful lot in them. The average BBC half-hour, 65 pages. Fawlty Towers, we used to do 135 to 140 pages. We literally did twice as many. Camera cuts, average shows got 200. We used to have 400 camera cuts. So there was an enormous amount in there. The other thing is they were very well constructed, and what Connie and I discovered worked for us was that we never really started to write the dialogue until we got the plot worked out. So we would spend sometimes as much as 2.5 weeks on a plot. Not always the same one, because if we got stuck, we'd sometimes put it to one side and pick up another one that we were halfway through and try and run with that. But we never really bothered to write the dialogue, as I say, until we'd really got the story worked out in considerable detail. You always have to change it a bit, because you can never visualize it all when you've just got the storyline there, and you'll find that one scene that you'd imagine doesn't work because Basil comes into it in a different frame of mind or in a different mood from what you need. So you're always having to rejig it a bit. But that was the key. We never started until we had the story, so we always knew where we were going. Some people try to write comedy by starting scene one and they start writing the dialogue. Well, the chances of them getting to a satisfactory ending a 1 in 100. You've got to kind of know where you're going while you're building the thing. One of the characteristics of those episodes is that there's always one key idea. But what we often tried to do along with that key idea was to have one or two other subplots, other threads running. And they would run parallel for a time, and then hopefully they would become intertwined. And by the end, the last 5 minutes, they would all come together. That's what we managed to do in the best of the episodes. But the most useful thing we used to do was to ask people for ideas, people who were in the business. For example, Connie and I were on holiday in Monte Carlo for 2 weeks, and we met a very nice woman who was just sort of helping us with the hotel, and we had coffee with her. And we said to her, what's the most difficult kind of guest that you have? And she described Mrs. Richards absolutely perfectly. And we wrote it all down, the fact that they always complain about everything, but they don't want it changed. They just want a reduction. And this business of strategic deafness, hearing what they want to hear. And she just gave us a character portrait. Another time I said to a great friend of mine called Andrew Lehman, who was a restaurateur, I said, what was the worst problem you had when you used to work at the Savoy Hotel? And he said, oh, the stiffs. I said, what? He said, oh, getting rid of the stiffs. I said, well, what do you mean people died a lot? Oh, he said, oh, a lot. He said, the old dears, I'm afraid they know the Savoy will always treat them really well and do these things, so they would sometimes check in with a bottle of pills, take them in the night. In the morning, Savoy staff would walk in, pick up the food, say, we got another one. And then the problem was getting the stiffs into the service elevator without alarming the other guests. Well, once you've been given that as an idea, I mean, it's just wonderful. And then you put a doctor in the hotel, and it's a kind of a joy. Some of those worked out very well. It's interesting because sometimes we had a wonderful ending for the dead body when we couldn't use it. The guy who died and who, gets put in the basket and all that stuff, we thought it would be terribly funny if we'd established without Basil knowing that he had a twin brother. So after Basil had finally got him in the basket, the twin brother would walk in and come up to the desk, and Basil would abuse him. This mindless practical joke. And we couldn't do it because there was no way of Basil telling the twin that his brother was dead. You couldn't do that in a comedy show. You see what I mean? So it was a great shame. It would have been too difficult mixing that kind of emotion. Timing is all important, and the hardest thing is to get it well enough rehearsed. Now, 5 days was never really enough, plus the day in the studio, to get it right. And what happened was that we did anything between 20 and 25 hours editing on each show. Almost every minute you see up on the screen, we spent 1 hour editing. And it was only by doing that you could just tighten it up and just tighten it there and take out a line of dialogue there and sometimes take out a repetition there or then lose 2 lines of dialogue there. That's what really got the pace on it. And there wasn't time. to get it that good in terms of just the rehearsal period and the studio recording. It felt to me very much like a team because in the first series, John Howard Davis, second series, Bobby Spears, and Prue, and Andrew and Connie and I listened to each other a great deal. And people, you know, if I was doing a scene with, let's say, with Sybil, with Prue, then Connie and Andrew would just sit there watching, and after a time, they might easily, Andrew might say, what about that? Or that isn't quite working. But because Connie and I had written and then rewritten the scripts, there wasn't an enormous amount of script rewriting. They were more or less right most of the time. But how we did them was very much a cooperative thing with lots of suggestions coming in. And I just did an American show, Third Rock from the Sun, and it was lovely. It was just like Fawlty Towers again, with about 6 key people giving ideas and nobody bothering whether their idea was accepted or not. It was just that sense of making it as good as possible.